Some behaviors look strange until you understand the wiring beneath them. The empath who leaves the room mid-conversation, the one who can't watch certain movies, the one who needs silence after social interaction the way others need air after being underwater. From the outside, these behaviors seem excessive, dramatic, signs of being too sensitive or poorly adjusted to normal life. From the inside, they're survival mechanisms, calibrations, the precise adjustments required to exist in a world that wasn't designed for nervous systems this permeable. This is about those behaviors, the ones that only make sense if you share the wiring that necessitates them. It isn't about being special or claiming to be more sensitive than others. And it isn't about pathologizing normal human variation or romanticizing struggle. It's about recognizing that certain nervous system configurations create specific needs that don't match cultural norms. That empaths develop particular coping strategies, not because they're broken, but because standard approaches don't work for how they're built. The behaviors that seem weird to others feel essential to the empath, not optional, not preference. Essential the way medication is essential, or sleep is essential, or anything else the body requires to function without breaking down. And the strangeness only exists from the outside. From the inside, these behaviors are obvious, necessary. The minimum adjustments required to remain functional in environments designed for different nervous systems. Most empaths learn early that explaining why they do these things doesn't help. People nod politely, then suggest the empath is overthinking. Being difficult needs to relax. So empaths stop explaining. They just do what they need to do and accept that it will look weird to people who don't share their particular form of sensitivity. These are 7 of those behaviors, the ones that reveal genuine empathic wiring, the ones only other empaths immediately recognize as rational rather than strange. The first behavior, needing to decompress alone after any social interaction, even positive ones. The empath comes home after dinner with friends, good friends, people they genuinely love. The evening was pleasant. No conflict, no drama, nothing objectively draining, and they need hours of silence to recover. Not because the interaction was bad, because interaction itself, regardless of quality, costs energy that solitude replenishes. Most people recharge through connection, through talking about their day, processing with others, staying engaged with people until sleep. The empath recharges through absence, through silence so complete they can finally stop processing everyone else's emotional frequency and return to their own signal. This looks antisocial. Looks like the empath didn't actually end by the interaction. Looks like something is wrong. But inside the empath's experience, the decompression is as necessary as the socializing. They can't do one without the other. Can't be genuinely present with people unless they know solitude is waiting afterward. Recovery time becomes non-negotiable, protected, the buffer that makes the next interaction possible. And only other empaths understand this without explanation. Only they recognize that enjoying people and needing to be away from them aren't contradictory. The second behavior, physically removing themselves from environments when the energy shifts. The empath is at a gathering. Everything is fine. Then something changes. Someone gets drunk, an argument starts brewing, the mood turns tense, and the empath leaves. Not gradually, immediately. They don't stay to smooth things over or help resolve the tension. They extract themselves before the situation escalates, before the emotional intensity reaches levels they'd have to absorb. This looks like abandonment. Looks like the empath can't handle normal conflict. Looks like they're being dramatic or oversensitive. But the empath has learned something through painful experience. They can't be present for other people's emotional chaos without taking that chaos into their own system. And they can't discharge it easily. Can't witness a fight and then forget about it. Can't watch someone's pain without feeling it in their own body for hours or days afterward. So they leave, not out of judgment, out of protection. The empath who stays and absorbs will spend days recovering from energy that had nothing to do with them. The empath who leaves preserves their capacity for the interactions that actually matter. And only other empaths recognize this as wisdom rather than weakness Only they understand that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is refuse to be present for dynamics that will damage you. The third behavior, canceling plans last minute when their system is already overloaded. The empath made plans 3 days ago, agreed enthusiastically, looked forward to it. But when the day arrives, they wake up knowing they can't do it. Their system is already at capacity, already processing too much, already running on reserves. And showing up to another interaction, even one they want, would push them past a threshold they can't afford to cross. So they cancel, often with short notice, often with explanations that sound flimsy because the real reason, I'm emotionally saturated and need to not absorb anyone else's energy today, doesn't translate well. This looks flaky, unreliable, like the empath doesn't value the relationship or doesn't want tea or put in effort. But the empath is making a calculation that most people don't have to make between honoring a commitment and honoring their nervous system's capacity. And they've learned that if they override their system's signals, they don't just have a bad time. They stop functioning. They lose access to presence, to genuine care, to the qualities that make them good company in the first place. Better to cancel and preserve capacity than show up depleted and perform a version of connection that serves no one. Only other empaths understand this math. Only they recognize that what looks like flakiness is actually sophisticated energy management. The fourth behavior, avoiding certain movies, shows, or books because the emotional content is too much. The empath can't watch stories with specific themes: child abuse, animal suffering, certain kinds of violence or emotional cruelty, not because they be squeamish, because their nervous system doesn't distinguish between fictional suffering and real suffering. The mirror neurons activate either way. The empathic response triggers regardless of whether the pain is real. And unlike other people who can enjoy intense stories and then move on, the empath carries the emotional residue for days, dreams about it, thinks about it, experiences the character's pain as if it happened to someone they know. So they avoid those stories entirely. Vet content carefully. Ask detailed questions about what happens before committing to watch. This looks like being overly sensitive, like needing trigger warnings for things that shouldn't affect adults. But the empath knows their own system, knows that exposing themselves to certain content costs more than the entertainment value provides, that they'll pay for 2 hours of viewing with 2 weeks of emotional processing. And only other empaths immediately understand this trade off. Only they recognize that consuming all available content isn't a badge of toughness. Sometimes it's just poor self knowledge. The fifth behavior, knowing things about people that weren't explicitly stated. The empath meets someone new. Within minutes, they know things, not from what the person said, from energy, from micro expressions, from the quality of presence. They know this person is lonely even though they're smiling, know they're carrying grief even though they're laughing, know they're uncomfortable even though they're participating. And the empath has learned not to speak these observations aloud because people don't like being seen that clearly by strangers, don't like having their hidden emotional reality named by someone who shouldn't have access to it. So the empath stays quiet, carries the knowledge privately, adjusts how they interact based on information the other person didn't consent to share. This looks like presumption, like the empath is making assumptions or being overly analytical. But the empath isn't guessing, they're reading, processing data that's actually there in tone, in body language, in the thousand small signals people broadcast without realizing. And only other empaths recognize this as legitimate perception rather than projection. Only they know what it's like to have access to information you didn't ask for and can't ignore. The sixth behavior, becoming silent or withdrawn around inauthentic people. The empath can be vibrant, engaged, fully present with certain people, and completely shut down with others, not because they're being rude, because they can feel the gap between what someone is performing and what they're actually feeling. And that gap creates a dissonance the empath system can't ignore. The person who's pretending to be happy, the one who's performing interest while feeling bored, the one who's saying kind things while thinking cry. Cycle thoughts. The empath feels all of it, the performance and the reality beneath it. And trying to engage with just the performance while ignoring the truth underneath requires energy the empath doesn't have. So they go quiet, minimal, polite but not open. This looks like the empath is being cold or judgmental, like they've decided this person isn't worth their time. But the empath isn't judging the inauthenticity. They're just unable to participate in it without exhausting themselves. They need the person to be real, or they need distance. The middle ground, pretending they can't feel the pretending, doesn't work for their nervous system. And only other empaths understand this immediately. Only they know what it's like to feel the performance so clearly that playing along becomes impossible. The seventh behavior, needing to process their own emotions alone before they can talk about them. Something happens. The empath feels it intensely, but they can't talk about it yet, can't process out loud, can't use other people as sounding boards while they're still figuring out what they actually feel. They need time alone first, time to sit with the feeling, to understand its contours, to separate their genuine response from all the emotional data they're picking up from others' reactions. Only after they've achieved some clarity internally can they bring the experience to another person. This looks like emotional unavailability. Looks like the empath is withholding or being distant or not trusting people with their feelings. But the empath has learned that processing with others while they're still emotionally raw leads to confusion. They absorb other people's reactions to their situation and lose track of their own truth. So they protect the early stages of processing. Keep feelings private until they're solid enough to withstand other people's input. And only other empaths recognize this as healthy rather than closed off. Only they understand that sometimes being open requires first being certain of what you're opening. If you've ever left a perfectly good social situation because you needed silence more than you needed company, this video doesn't tell you to be more social. It suggests you're honoring legitimate needs. If you've ever canceled plans last minute because your system was already overloaded, when you knew showing up depleted would serve no one, you're not being flaky. You're being honest about capacity. If you've ever known things about people they didn't say and learned not to speak those observations because people find the visibility uncomfortable, you're not presumptuous. You're managing information you didn't ask for but can't ignore. If you've ever needed to process emotions alone before sharing them, when talking while still raw leads to confusion rather than clarity, you're not emotionally withholding. You're protecting your truth while it forms. These behaviors exist because empathic nervous systems work differently. They process more data. They absorb more energy. They need more recovery time. They can't ignore information that others filter out automatically. And the culture mostly treats these needs as problems to overcome rather than legitimate requirements to honor. So empaths learn to explain less and accommodate more, to do what they need to do while accepting that it will look strange to people who don't share their wiring. But other empaths see these behaviors and recognize them instantly, not as weird, as obvious, as the precise calibrations required to remain functional when your nervous system doesn't match the world's default settings. Some behaviors look strange until you understand the wiring beneath them. The empath who leaves early, who cancels plans, who can't watch certain content, who knows things they weren't told, who goes silent around inauthenticity, who needs to process alone. They're not being difficult. They're navigating a world designed for different nervous systems while trying to preserve the sensitivity that makes them who they are. These 7 behaviors aren't the complete list, just the ones that reveal genuine empathic wiring most clearly, the ones that only make sense if you share the particular form of permeability they're designed to manage. And the empaths reading this list won't need explanations for why each behavior is necessary. They'll just recognize themselves, will feel the relief of seeing their own strange-seeming strategies named as rational rather than excessive. Because that's what happens when empaths find each other. The behaviors that require justification with everyone else suddenly need no defense at all. They're just understood. Immediately. Completely. As the obvious accommodations they always were. Some weirdness isn't dysfunction. It's adaptation.